Thank you very much for joining us on this very special show, because joining us live right here is Professor Arvind Panagariya, Professor of Economics at the Columbia University, and of course the former Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog, and a man who does have his ears extremely close to the ground as far as Indian economy is concerned, somebody who's been known to advise the Prime Minister on various issues. He's here on a good day as far as the FDI regulations are concerned, and also the budget making in full swing. So thanks very much, Dr. Panagariya, for sparing time and speaking to us right here at ET Now. I really think FDI as a subject is extremely close to your heart. It's a subject that you've championed when you were a part of this government and outside as a very, very eminent economist yourself. But what do you make of the government's FDI push today, whether it's 100% automatic route in single brand retail or the construction route or about Air India? And I'm going to take it step by step, everything individually. But as an overall FDI push, what do you make of this?
No, I think I'm very pleased. It also, well, first and foremost, Supriya, this is a clear signal that it may be close to the end. You know, we are moving towards the end of the fourth year of the government, but there is no let up on the reforms. So I think first and foremost, that is the very good signal. Now, specifically in terms of the single brand retail, I suspect we needed this. And I'm so pleased that finally the government has done it, because, you know, single brand retails often, right, I mean, when you call them single brand retails, they want to come in with 100% investment rather than take a joint partner. And so this should really also help boost the investment by the single brand retailers. So I'm totally delighted.
No, I'm sure you're delighted, because this is an issue, like I said, extremely close to your heart and something that you have championed. But let me go step by step and talk to you about the various things that the government has done. And automatic 100% FDI in single brand retail, I'm presuming it makes it easier for companies to do business in India. But what else changes apart from that? Because 49% was automatic and 51% was with the government nod. Now all of that is automatic. What really changes as far as a company looking to do business in India is concerned?
You know, so as I said, there are companies, you know, when they are single brand retail, they often want to come in to a country with complete control of their business. And with 49% obviously, or even say 51 is what we had, you still had to take a joint partner, and so it had to be a joint venture. Now this opens the door to companies who wanted to come with 100% control. You know, part of the problem, remember, with IKEA, for example, they wanted 100% also. And so it is a big difference. Huh? So it's not the same thing as 51.
This isn't the same thing, but what does this mean as far as investments are concerned? Do you expect more money to pour in? Do you expect more interest to come to India in terms of the companies that are looking to come? Which are the sectors that you believe will attract FDI in single brand retail?
Listen, look, you know, I mean, economists are very bad at predicting, you know, as to who will. What economists do is to think of good rules which would apply uniformly to all, and then, you know, some will choose to react to those new rules or new liberal regime. So I would not hazard any guesses as to who would come, but I think more will come. There is no doubt about that. That's one thing. And the second thing, that there is a lot of signal value in this. You know, in the international markets, in the end, if we are going to want to put our ore into those markets and be an exporter and be a rising exporter in those markets, then the fact that we are also open in terms of our own markets is a good signal. So I see from both those perspectives, it is a big plus.
Dr. Panagariya, I know you've kind of tried to push but haven't been able to be successful. Well, it's very good that we've got an easier single brand retail, 100% nod as far as the automatic route is concerned. Are you disappointed that the government has still steered clear from multi-brand retail, and do you believe there can be consensus, at least in the term of this government, at all, to go and push multi-brand retail at all? I mean, I know at one point in time it was considered against the consciousness of this country, but I guess reality has changed since then.
Right, but you see, remember that for this government, generally the organized retail foreign investment is a little bit of a problem, because you know the political base of the government comes from the small traders and these large number of shopkeepers. So if anything, you see, this is one particular reform I would say that the previous government should have actually done already. The UPA government should, because you know they in terms of a constituency, they did not see the shopkeepers as their constituency. That was a BJP constituency. So clearly that is a more difficult reform for the present government for the BJP government to do. But even so, at least in single brand retail they have made progress, and so it makes me more hopeful that maybe in another 6 months or so we will see some progress on multi-brand retail also. But I think, you know, right now I'm happy with what has been done.
Absolutely. There is no denying the fact that what has been done is fairly significant, and we must not reduce it in its value in anticipation of multi-brand retail. So I stand with you on that. But before I go to a subject that you've tried to push very hard, which is Air India, I will quickly take a question on construction. And of course, the 100% automatic route is all very good, but the permits and the land, land acquisition or land reforms still remain very wanting. In that sense, how much of reality on the ground changes with the nod for 100% automatic investment and FDI in the construction sector?
No, remember that you know that is something that that is all that the central government can do. Now, the Land Acquisition Act was put in place by the previous government. Is there not very much, and in fact, to the credit of the present government, they had tried to reform it. It is simply that the opposition, which had put this act in place, would not play in the Rajya Sabha, and so that reform did not happen. So, because that barrier still remains, does not take away from the fact that at least one specific regulation, which was a central government regulation, has been done away with.
Fair point indeed. Let's just move to a subject that you tried to push very hard as Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog, and I will talk to you on the pace at which this is happening right now. But the fact that the government has given a nod for 49% FDI in Air India stake sale, that should come as an encouraging signal, because it also tells you, apart from the fact that the government is serious about divestment, it's also open to a foreign entity coming in.
Yes, this is regarding Air India. Right. This is a question about Air India, right?
That's right, sir. Yes, this is about Air India.
Yes, yes. So no, I think that is also very significant to me, because it is something that I had certainly wanted that we ought to do, because in the end, if we are going to trying to maximize the value of the airline to the government, which means to the public really, then the opening the door a little wider brings in more competition, and more competition would of course also mean therefore larger value that the government is going to get for the airline. And in the end, we also want, after privatization, for this airline to succeed, to deliver good services. So from that perspective also, letting the foreign investors come in is a very welcome move on the part of the government.
But Dr. Panagariya, as far as Air India is concerned, the government has gone so far and not far enough, and there's a reason why I say that. It says 49% can be FDI, a foreign entity can come in, but the ownership and control will continue to remain Indian. Do you believe that's a bit of a, that's being too cagey, and that will deter foreign investors? I mean, why will a foreign investor want to come in as a minority partner, get a 49% stake, and still not be able to control the airline? Do you believe in some sense there is that same paranoia that plays in New Delhi again at work? And would you advise against it?
No, no, look, I mean, every government has to work within certain political constraints, certain political parameters, and maybe, this is what has kept the government to 49. There is a lot of, I mean, whether you like it or not, there is a lot of sentiment around in the country that, India is India's national carrier, therefore, it has to keep a national identity. I think there is also something within the legislation or some, this you need to verify, but that ultimately Air India has to be kept as a company which is an Indian company. And that maybe that is the reason that they cannot do a full 100% foreign investment. That then there is a danger that it will no longer remain an Indian company. So there may be some legislative issue there also. I vaguely remember seeing this somewhere. I'm sorry, I can't put my finger on it, but maybe you can verify it. But that may have been actually also at play in this when the government limited the foreign investment to 49%.
But Dr. Panagariya, in your role as Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog, I remember very clearly you had pushed very aggressively the stake sale in Air India. You had talked about privatization of Air India because, like a lot of right-minded people there, you believe the government doesn't need to be in the business of running airlines and hotels, and which is something that you had put your weight behind. Are you a little disappointed at the pace at which it is happening? This should have happened yesterday and not tomorrow.
Well, now, glass can be half full or half empty. Remember, this should have happened 20 years ago, perhaps. But, this has been discussed out over and over again. No government actually did anything about it. This government has done something. Now, and at least in the case of Air India, I feel quite optimistic that the process has moved forward. And the transactions advisor has been appointed, and the Civil Aviation Ministry is very much on board. So here actually I am generally more optimistic, and I'm quite okay with where the matter stands. My sort of disappointment is more actually with the lot of the other privatization that from NITI Aayog I had pushed through. The cabinet had approved it. There's some 30 public sector enterprises that the cabinet has already approved for privatization, and at least the first list that was approved by the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs was practically more than a year ago and so forth. And I sort of feel a little more there that right. No action has happened in terms of the disinvestment of those units. In fact, Air India actually came much later. And Air India has actually moved much farther than any of these other enterprises which had been approved by the cabinet for disinvestment.
No, that's a question that I have for you, and when I switch gears and turn away from FDI to that, I do have that question for you, because I think that's an issue that we want to discuss in greater detail with you, considering you spearheaded it as a part of the government. But what would you say to critics who are turning around today after these decisions and saying that at best these are procedural? The FIPB was abolished, the individual ministries were to take call, they were given a time period of 3 months each for FDI proposals. What's the big deal of making it automatic? What would you say to critics who believe that at best what has happened today is not earth-moving, is not groundbreaking, it is at best procedural?
Look, I mean, reforms by nature are never, well, I shouldn't say never, but for most part, reforms are a piecemeal process. It's a gradual process, and in each step you make some progress. So, I'm certainly not, I don't put myself among those skeptics. As long as we keep movement, the forward movement is there, I think I'm happy. Now, skeptics and critics will always, there is always a way to move the bar. Right? You can always raise the bar that, oh, you did this. But, of course, on everything you tell me, I could go back to the 1991 Big Bang reforms, and I could just put lots of buts there. I mean, there we did, that was a major gigantic reform. I could still say, oh, but you did not actually end the import licensing on the consumer goods. But, I thought still it was a very big reform that we flat out ended the import licensing on all other goods other than the consumer goods. That to me was a huge reform. So nevertheless, if you want to be skeptical, you can always put a but.
No, absolutely. And you and I are both not skeptics, and we both know that. But as someone who understands India both from within and outside, and I call you a global insider for that reason, you obviously have a pulse on what the foreign investors want as well. Do foreign investors want liberalized FDI cap? Is this something that they kind of obsess over, or what they really need are structural reforms, the kinds that we have seen in GST, the kinds we would want to see in land and labor?
Yes. No. I mean, certainly they would want the structural reforms also. But that doesn't mean that they did not want the FDI cap to be raised. Because remember, go back to the insurance, for example, how long this demand from the foreign investors was there that raised the limit at least from 26% to 49%. And remember that, that was under the Vajpayee government that the insurance was first liberalized at 26%, and then it took practically almost 15 years for us to raise that 26 to 49, which is something that for all those 14 or 15 years, the foreign companies had been demanding. The US government in particular had been constantly kind of pushing for the cap to be raised to 49%. So it is something that the foreign investors do seek, and especially I would say that in the case of the single brand retail, it is even more important that no clearances are required anymore. It is automatic, and so then they can go and directly deal with the state governments regarding the land and all the local needs that the investors have.
Fair point indeed. Let's switch gears and let's talk about the India economy and the India growth story, sir, because again, this is something that you've championed, you've written on extensively, you've tried to contribute even as member and as Vice Chairman NITI Aayog. The World Bank is estimating growth in 2018 to be 7.3% and then 7.5% for the next 2 years. On an average 10-year period, it expects India to grow at 7%. Have we shortchanged our growth? Because, I mean, is 7% over 10 years or is 7.5% over the next 2 years or 7.3? Is that reason to celebrate, you think?
Well, let me put it this way. I mean, I think their forecast for 2018, which is 7.3%, is in the ballpark. I think, I would agree with it. The give and take, with 0.5% more may happen. But 7.3, if you are trying to be realistic also, 7.3 is a reasonable one. Over a longer period, I certainly don't want to stay with 7%. No, I'm not happy with 7% over a 10-year period. I want us to be growing at least 8%. And I think gradually we have put the pieces in place. I really do continue to believe that we will actually in 2 years' time, if not sooner, get to 8%. And the reason I say this is because the positive impact on the growth rate of the lot of the reforms that the present government has done has still not actually come in. You see, the government has been there only for 3.5 years, which means that all the reforms it has done have been done within the last 3.5 years. And very, very few reforms actually begin to have their impact right away. I mean, this I have said repeatedly like a broken record, that when we ultimately got to this 8% plus growth trajectory starting from 2003-04, it happened on the back of almost 12 or 13 years of reforms. So, Prime Minister Narasimha Rao did a lot of the reforms. Then after that, Prime Minister Vajpayee did a lot of the reforms. But remember that, if reforms were going to so quickly jump up or bump up the growth rate to 8%, it should have happened during the Vajpayee years, because Narasimha Rao had done a lot of the reforms. But it didn't happen. In fact, the growth was rather tepid when Yashwant Sinha was the finance minister. But eventually, of course, the reforms that he did, that is Yashwant Sinha and Prime Minister Vajpayee did, eventually got us in 2003-04 to 8% plus trajectory. So what Prime Minister Modi has done, a lot of that impact is yet to happen, and it is going to happen. You know, it is not a joke that you jump 30 places, and in fact over a longer period, if you have more than 40 places on their ease of doing business, your sovereign rating also takes a jump, and also these are all indications that the government has done a lot of good things, but the impact of it on growth is yet to happen.
No, absolutely. And I don't think anybody is debating the fact that what the government has put into motion will have a long-term impact and will help us in the long term. I think what people are a little worried about are pockets of growth and engines of growth. And you have been a big votary of this as well. Indian exports, for instance, at a time when global growth is at a 3-year high, our exports haven't picked up. And that, of course, continues to be an area of concern for most people, and especially for someone like you who specializes in exports, who's spoken and written so much about it.
Yes, I think that remains an area of concern. By the way, in the last 3 or 4 months, we have seen some good surge in growth in exports. So finally, we have turned the corner a bit. But I still do agree with you 100% that this is where we need serious structural reforms. We need to do the right kind of labor reforms. You know, we talk a lot about labor reforms, but not everything we do in labor area is a reform. You know, sometimes you can end up doing the wrong thing. So I mean, we need the right kind of reforms, by which I mean that the kinds of reforms that would actually create incentives for the enterprises to grow bigger in terms of their employment, meaning, you know, that firms will choose not to stay small, but that they will have an incentive to grow bigger, reforms that will give rise to improved formal sector employment. Those are the kinds of structural reforms in labor markets we need. Eventually, I really hope that we would also revisit the Land Acquisition Act, because that too has been a bit of an obstacle to industrialization, particularly, you know, when we are going to get into very large firms. If we are trying to bring in the global firms to the shores of India in sectors such as garments or apparel, I think, you know, you also have to deal with the land prices, you have to deal with the acquisition of land for those companies and all. Right. So that is also very important. But there, I think, you know, until the government has votes in the Rajya Sabha, we'll still have to wait. I think still the votes are actually not sufficiently there. So, I mean, I think all those structural reforms I do wish and hope that we will do in the years to come.
Now, as far as the structural reforms are concerned, you're right that, you know, that's the direction we need to go in. But there's a budget right around the corner, and this is going to be the last full-year budget as far as the Modi government is concerned. What do you believe Budget 2018 needs to do to put India on the high growth trajectory, given the rural stress that we are seeing, you know, and other things like that? What do you believe should be the focus of Budget 2018?
Well, you know, that is the, I mean, when you say focus, clearly this being an election year, the government from that perspective will have to set the priorities. I would really leave that part to the judgment of the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, because they understand the political ramifications of what they do a lot better than I can ever think of. What I would say for the budget is that I would still lean very heavily on the side of fiscal rectitude, fiscal consolidation. I can understand if the Finance Minister decides to stay with the 3.2% fiscal deficit for 1 year rather than, you know, move down to 3%, let's say. That is perfectly okay. Markets will be fine with that. But I also hear a lot of voices saying that, oh, what's the big deal? You know, let it go off to 4% or let it go to 3.8%. I personally think that that is not a very good advice. That would blemish a very, very stellar record of this government, where it has brought in a huge kind of consistency to fiscal consolidation. So on that front, that is my view, that you know, if you pause and stay at 3.2%, that's okay. But if you really reverse what you have done, that is not so good. In terms of the populist spending, my own take is that, of course, the election year, everybody has to do something, but I hope that the kinds of spending that is done only for the purpose of the elections is such that it is a one-time expenditure. It's not as that purely for the election purposes. I hope the government doesn't launch schemes which will then result in unproductive, unnecessary expenditure forever in perpetuity. I think that is the danger during the elections. So I hope. I mean, I call this a sort of Tamil Nadu model where televisions and other goodies get distributed during elections, but that's a one-time deal. And the bigger long-term expenditures should be determined purely by the priorities of the government and not by the election considerations.
Those are sound words of wisdom as far as the budget 2018 is concerned. So 3.2% is non-negotiable. Look at it carefully and don't let it breach to levels of 4% because that is going to be irresponsible and something that Dr. Panagariya would not make you do. But thank you very, very much on that note, Dr. Arvind Panagariya, and a conversation right here with us at ET Now. We wish you all the very best with the rest of your India trip, and we continue to keep hearing from you on Indian economy and everything that matters in India. On that note, completely out of time on this very special edition.
Thank you, and a great pleasure to be with you, Supriya.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks very much, viewers, for tuning in. Up next, news and updates continue right here on